Back in the Venetian hotel studio / hotel room thing that we put together here at SHOT Show, I've got Cody Wisniewski. Cody, welcome to the show, dude.
Thank you so much for having me. Happy to be here.
I'm so happy to have you. This came together sort of quickly in putting the interviews together that we're doing out here all week long. And, I've not ever had an attorney on the show, right? And the special thing about you is that you work for Firearms Policy Coalition. And so FPC, for people to know them, maybe on Instagram, it's @gun policy.
Yep.
And I think, and we're gonna hear about this, that you must not be sleeping. You must be like going 24/7 all day long, because there's so much stuff going on out there in the world of firearms policies and legislation and lobbying and all this stuff. I find what you do is fascinating, but at the same time, I really don't know how any of it works. And I don't think that a lot of other people do either. They just see the stuff and where they are in the world, or where they are in like the country, their state, their city. It's very tough to keep up with.
Yeah. It's it is crazy, and there's so much going on. And so, I'm a senior attorney for constitutional litigation with Firearms Policy Coalition, and our mission is just to support maximal human liberty. Right, our mission is very broad, but what we focus on as of right now is gun rights and people's ability to possess the tools that they need in order to protect themselves, their loved ones, and their communities. And in some places, that means we're doing, lawsuits around so-called assault weapons. In some places, that means we're litigating over magazines. In other places, we're also dealing with speech issues that come up in conjunction with gun ownership and federal regulation. So our focus really is making sure that people can live their lives and be as free as possible and protect their lives however they see fit. And you're right. It's a crazy, crazy fight right now. There was a big Supreme Court decision that came down last year, New York State Rifle and Pistol Association v. Bruen.
Mm-hmm.
And it really shook up our world. And it really changed what we need to do and how we're approaching it. Bruen was really kind of a restatement of what the Supreme Court had said in 2008 in this landmark opinion, District of Columbia v. Heller.
Right.
But courts around the country were doing it wrong. We're applying the wrong test. We're looking at the Second Amendment incorrectly.
Mm-hmm.
And so when Bruen came down, Bruen was really, I like to describe it kind of like as an exclamation point on Heller. It didn't say anything that was brand new, really. It just said, when we set down that test in 2008, we really meant it, and you guys aren't following it. And so since that happened, it has been crazy. There's been a lot of push. There's been a lot of cases. There's been a lot of lawsuits. And there's also been a lot of governments that are now trying to avoid Bruen and are trying to avoid what the Supreme Court has already told them that they can't do. And so we're seeing new types of laws come out along with the ones that have been in place. But I do my best to get my sleep. Some days it doesn't work, but I try my best.
That was a very good explanation of just sort of what's happened in this last year. Obviously, things are heated. And when you hear the Heller and the Bruen cases, and it's real, again, it's tough to keep up. And so many things now hinge on those cases, specifically Bruen.
Yeah.
And I don't think people really kind of understand why that is, and the circumnavigation that seems to be happening around. Is there a way to, like, Reader's Digest version this?
For sure.
For people like me who don't get it or are trying my best?
Absolutely. So the easiest way to describe it is that the Supreme Court for a very long time strayed towards reading a lot into the Constitution that may or may not have been there. There was a lot of very pro-government policies coming through the court. You have a court that is allowing government agencies to expand their power, the government to itself to expand its power. And so that's happening over the course of a century. And what we're seeing now is a shift. And we're seeing a shift back to what we call originalism. And originalism is the idea that the Constitution meant what it said when it was drafted and ratified, and the same as the amendments. I know it's kind of a crazy concept.
It's fucking wild to me, man. Like, I got to time out for a second. Why would we think any different? Because it's not satisfying your emotion or your political agenda today. Really is the only thing I can come up with as an answer for this.
Yeah, one of the big problems is, culture is huge, right? If you don't have the culture there, then it doesn't matter what you're doing in a courtroom. And that's a lot of what FPC focuses on too, right? A lot of what we're focused on is education and the cultural side too, of making sure that people are invested and people are aware of what's going on. But you had a culture that didn't understand how rights work. You had a culture that it wasn't fully clear exactly how the constitutional structure should come about. We're still talking, one of my big pet peeves is people still talk about constitutional rights. You have a constitutional right to keep and bear arms. Mm-hmm. Well, you don't have a constitutional right to keep and bear arms. You have a constitutionally protected right to keep and bear arms.
It's already there, man.
Yeah, your right to possess a firearm and defend yourself pre-exists our government. It pre-exists the Second Amendment. It pre-exists the Constitution. It exists when it's protected, and it exists when it's not protected. Somebody that lives in a country that isn't allowed to own a gun, they still have a right. That right is just being infringed.
Regulated. Yeah.
So I'm half Canadian. I'll out myself now. I lived in Canada for some time.
It's okay, man. It's all right.
Canadians have the exact same right to self-defense that we do. Their government isn't respecting that right and is trampling all over it. And our government's doing its fair share to do it as well.
Right. But it's different in Canada right now, man.
Yeah. But I think it's really important that we recognize the way that structure works, right? That right is yours. It exists independent of the government. We just have a protection in place that should stop the government from infringing on that right. And when you get this originalism shift in the court, that's when this starts really changing, where courts are starting to look more at, well, what was the original public meaning of to keep and bear arms? What were historical laws that existed in 1791 and around the ratification of the amendments in the Constitution? And that's the test that Bruen has kind of reiterated from Heller. And so in order for a government to pass any sort of gun control law, they would have to point to a historical analog that demonstrates that it was understood that they could regulate that practice when the amendment was ratified, because that's what the people who agreed to it understood it to mean.
Right. That's what it meant. Right.
Yeah.
Then.
And so the shift in the court has been happening in a lot of other spaces too. Obviously in the guns context, in the self-defense context, but it's also there's been a shift when it comes to property rights. There's been a shift when it comes to agency power. There was a big Supreme Court case last year, West Virginia v. EPA, which talked about what federal agencies can do in the context of their authorizing statutes, because federal agencies are the executive branch and they're supposed to enforce the law.
That's their job.
And they're not supposed to make the law. That one's for Congress. But we've strayed, I guess.
Dramatically strayed.
Yeah. So you're seeing a big shift. And
pistol braces.
We're coming back to that one.
That's one of the biggest ones we're seeing right now.
Yeah. But I think that's I don't think that was a Reader's Digest version at all. I think that was like a 15-minute explanation. But that's kind of what's happening, is that the court's got that shift.
I thought you did an outstanding job with that. I fully comprehend and get that. And you needed to do that, man. And I think that's what I heard you saying there, I'm just thinking through it and trying to process when did this really start happening? Like, again, we are going to kind of examine this a little bit differently and kind of talk and debate, and there's room for interpretation here. And where does that start and where does that stop? Has that just been something that's been gradually happening over time? We just haven't really seen it because it hasn't been important to us. And so because they've been doing it in other areas that are not directly impacting us, or we don't feel like they're directly impacting us at the time. And now that is the norm, or now that is the culture that exists there. And now it's just upon us and we're going, holy shit, how did this happen? And if so, like, how long has this been going on for to where we could put a finger on it and go, it really started right about here with these particular things. And right now we're suffering the impacts of this.
So the negative flow, a lot of that starts, you're talking 19th century when you're getting the shift of the court to start pushing towards different policies. But really what happens is this progressive mindset really hits in post-Civil War coming into the 20th century.
Good.
And you get this shift. And then you get, our first truly progressive president, Woodrow Wilson, who was basically at one point said, the Constitution either says what I want it to say or I don't care. And you get this shift. You get this shift to the difference between a respect of natural rights and individual rights. And the shift goes to bureaucrats know best. And so we should, this is their position, we must instill power into bureaucrats because they know how to lead people's lives better than they do.
Yeah.
And it's this idea, it's this fundamental idea that we believe that human nature is enduring, right? This is like a principle if you go back to Aristotle, right? That human nature is enduring. Well, progressivism doesn't agree. Progressivism believes that you can change human nature. And so they think that they can social engineer a society through bureaucratic policy in order to then mold the whole, mold the society to shift public opinion in that way. And so basically through the 1900s, you see this shift. You see government getting bigger and bigger and bigger. You see agencies grabbing more and more power. You see new agencies coming into place. This coincides with like the income tax. This coincides like 1913.
It's all related, right?
Yeah. So you get this huge change. Now, the pushback doesn't really start until you get towards the mid or end 1900s. Yeah.
The 50s issue.
Exactly.
Late after World War II, we're getting into, pre-60s and things get a little wild there, right? Yeah.
And then you start seeing this pushback, this focus on individual rights, this focus on property rights, which is really where it starts. You have the Sagebrush Rebellion. You've got where you can point to it for the courts. Really for the Supreme Court. The easiest thing to point to is when you look at Clarence Thomas being appointed in 1991, and he starts talking about natural rights, right? He's trained in natural rights theory when he's at EEOC, and he understands the formulation and how our system of government works. And then you also get Justice Scalia, who joins the bench. And with those two is where you really start to see the Supreme Court start to take this on. And originalism starts to become something that lawyers are talking about. It starts to become something that is being discussed at law schools. It starts to become things that, and obviously basically all judges are lawyers. Technically you don't have to be a lawyer to be on the Supreme Court.
Right, that's interesting, yeah.
But so when you got the legal conversation shifting, then you start getting the courts shifting. And first you see it in this property rights context, then you start to see it. You see it a lot in speech, right? Speech has always been kind of the popular one. As you know, firearms were just behind that trend, right? It took a long time to get that kind of landmark Second Amendment case, and you don't get Heller until 2008. I mean, that's really recent.
It's just like yesterday, man. 15 years ago is not that long ago.
Yeah, but what's so amazing about Heller, what's so important about it is that Heller it might not be perfect in my view, but it's a walkthrough in how originalism works and how we interpret the Constitution. I mean, Scalia, who authored the opinion, he starts with the text. What does the text say? What did bear arms mean in 1791 when they wrote those words? Because they thought that they were protecting something. So what did they think they were protecting? And, what were there other statutes or were there discussions around this that can help elucidate the meaning? And so you get this real deep dive into what these words meant, something that is beyond just, it says shall not be infringed, right? It's a very deep dive.
Yeah, it's very specific though.
Yeah, it is very specific. It's pretty straightforward, but it is
4 words, man.
Yeah. It's this real deep dive into what the Second Amendment, what the founders and framers understood the Second Amendment to mean and stand for. And we were on the movement writ large was kind of on the trailing edge of that space, but that's what FPC is now. That's our focus, right? Our focus is starting from those words and working out. We've got, we have a lot of cases. We could talk about that. We've got around 60 active cases across the country. But we also have a team that's doing research. So, we have a sister organization, FPC Action Foundation. We have a director of constitutional research. We put constitutional, we like the Constitution. We have a director of constitutional research over there who's doing that original research into what the state of the law was in 1791 when the Second Amendment was ratified. So the pushback was late after this kind of big progressive overhaul, but it's here. it's here.
It's definitely here, man.
And it's important. And I think people are really starting to pick up that. There's a lot of energy around it right now, which is awesome.
Huge energy. And I'm going to say this too, it feels like an industry. And so I think that there's questions that could be asked there specific to those from the outside looking in or those that are very closely, it is an industry. You have I want to talk about FPC, sort of how it's structured and who's there and how do you keep up and all that kind of stuff. But these are people, they're making a living, right? So there's money to be made fighting these things. There's also money to be made fighting them on the other side. Yeah. So there's a lot of lawyers on the other side. There's a lot of state officials on the other side that go to work every day and get paid by those people, like we the people, to fight this. So it's almost like there's an industry. And whenever you have that and there's finance involved, there's going to be questions being asked, like what the hell is really going on here? Do you ever get that, like on the FPC side?
Not so much. We're very open. I mean, we're a 501c4. Like our financials are available online. You can see them. Same thing for the Action Foundation. It's a C3.
Transparent, right?
Yeah, and I think what is really obvious when people look at us is how much work we're doing. It's really obvious what we're doing. And what's really cool about our work is it's all available. If you want to see what we're doing in courtrooms, you can go to the website. You can go to the legal battles and you can see every case that we have. More than that, you can click on that case. You can get a synopsis about it. And then you can read the full docket.
Get into the briefs, right?
Yeah. If you want to see what I'm writing on a Saturday night before SHOT Show, because the ATF likes to do things on the Friday before SHOT Show, you can see it in a court filing. You can go and you can read that. So we're very open. And I think that's really important. Our research, our academic articles, our amicus briefs that we're working on, those things are all available to people. So they can see exactly what's going on. The industry on the opposite side of us is huge, right? I mean, the anti-gun movement is massive. It's very well funded. It doesn't come as a surprise to anybody.
Right.
And there's a ton of different organizations that we're always working against. And so, we're fighting against governments often, right? A lot of time, all the time, we're suing government entities. We're suing the federal government. We're suing a state. We're suing the police officer that's enforcing the law. We're suing a sheriff's department, whatever it is. Whoever's enforcing the law, whoever's passing the law. But you'll also see that all of these anti-gun groups are jumping in these cases too. And so some of it is, tax-funded attorneys on the other side.
A lot of it's big private money though.
And then other of it is big pushes on that side. So we do a lot with what we have. We also, we work really well with everybody. We have cases with the other, FPC is not the only organization that's taking on this fight. Right. And we work with the other organizations in cases. We work with state-based organizations. We work with other national organizations. I want to win. I want people's to have their rights. I want governments to back down and to stop infringing on people.
Just leave me alone, man.
That's all we want.
Yeah.
And if that's best accomplished with working with every other group in the country, I'll work with every other group in the country. It's about the fight. And that's what's important. And so taking that on, being able to work with everybody, being able to use our resources in the most efficient way is huge because legal battles are expensive.
They usually had lost a long time, man. It's a battle of attrition there, like keeping those people on to make it all the way through to the other side. And passing the baton is one thing, but having to do that too many times, I would imagine, it can really be, sound the death knell with regard to how much progress can you really make? How many people are doing all this? Like what's the structure of FPC look like in that sense?
Yeah, so we have a team of attorneys that we have attorneys with FPC, and then we also work with attorneys outside of FPC. Everybody that's subject matter experts, that knows what's going on, that is paying attention to as the industry moves. So we kind of do a little bit of both. We have our in-house research division. We have an in-house policy division as well that does like bill analysis when it's needed. We'll see things as they're coming down the pike so that we can get ready on the legal side if things do pass. So we do a little bit of everything. And we'll have some cases where, we're leading the charge where, I will be leading a case. So as an example, we sued the ATF when they passed their framer receiver rule that was going after, these so-called 80%ers that legally that doesn't mean anything, right? All they are is not firearms.
Yeah, it got really popular there for a bit, though, that term, man.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an industry marketing term. I get it. It makes sense from that perspective. But legally, they're nothing. Like, it's just a thing. It's the same as a stapler. Yep. It's the same as a block of wood. Right. So we filed that lawsuit in the Northern District of Texas. We got an injunction in that case. So for our plaintiffs and for our corporate client, Tactical Machining, they have an injunction in place, which means the ATF isn't able to enforce that rule against them. And we're now briefing the merits of that case. And so we're working to the kind of a full inevitable resolution. So that case is a good example where that's one of mine.
They got an injunction, but that's not necessarily, it's not a win yet.
Well, it's a win, but it's not the final win.
Right. So it's like you won the battle. We're still fighting the war.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's a great way. Yeah. We've stopped the ATF from being able to enforce it against the people that are in the case. And now what we're pushing for is the court to set aside the rule in its entirety. And so that's a good example of a case where we take charge. We're leading the fight on that one. I'm the attorney on that case. I'm working on the briefs, so I'll be in court when we're arguing it. But it's also another case where we're working with another group. We're working with Mountain States Legal Foundation, who has a Center to Keep and Bear Arms. They're co-counsel on that case. We're working with them.
To keep the foot on the gas.
Yeah, to keep going nonstop, right? To keep all these cases moving, to keep the fight going. And then in other cases, we're working with some of our team of attorneys that, outside of FPC. But what's important there is we make sure that we're working with people that are subject matter experts. We're working with guys who know how firearms work, they know how they function, they understand the culture, they understand the industry, and we're working through all of our existing research and our existing understanding of how these cases should proceed.
I'm chuckling over here because what that is the exact opposite of what's happening on the anti-gun side with what's being written and how it's being worded. And it's confusing, and it's clear that they have no understanding of any of the things that you just said. Right on down to, it's almost negligent. Like, you're an attorney, right, that's putting this stuff together, your state legislator or whatever it happens to be. Like, you have a duty to get this right? You're going back to the rights, and whether it's constitutional or not, whatever. Look, you're fucking with people. And this is going into law. So there shouldn't be any vagueness here. There shouldn't be any room, and there should be zero tolerance for any of that, as far as I'm concerned. But who am I? I'm just the dude. So subject matter experts handling very specific things. And you mentioned there's as many as 60 cases out there right now. How do you keep up with that? How do you divide and conquer on that? Like, is there literally 60 subject matter expert people that are assigned to each one of these? Like, how does this work?
No. So we have attorneys, attorneys will have multiple cases. You'll have a caseload. That you're working multiple cases at any one time. Cases can be really long. So sometimes the way that our kind of litigation works, right? It's nothing like criminal law. So anything that you've seen criminal law-wise, you can throw out the window. And then it's really not even like other civil law cases at times either, like a contract dispute, right? It's nothing like that.
Okay.
So
what's it like?
So our cases, so they can be really long. They can have really long lifespans because you're digging into these precedential questions, things that if a court strikes down a gun control law, if a circuit court, which is, has broad jurisdiction over several states, strikes down a gun control law, then that has a big impact. So a lot of times courts take their time dealing with these. But what you get is a series of sprints, and then you might have, a moment of breath. And so what we're careful to do, and all attorneys are kind of careful to do generally, is to try and balance your caseload so that you can have sprints in successive cases, but you never have competing sprints.
Gotcha.
And so when you first file a case, usually that's the big sprint, because you're filing the case and then you're going for either a TRO, which is a temporary restraining order, or a preliminary injunction.
Okay.
And what those are, basically, that is just asking the court to pause.
Give you some breathing room.
Maintain the status quo until you can finish the whole case. So you have to go in. But the problem is, to get a TRO or a PI, as we call them, you have to prove that you're probably going to win. A substantial likelihood of success is the test.
How does this differ? How is that viewed, circuit to circuit?
So it changes. Yeah. So that's...
I mean, I'm in the 9th. I mean, our state's in the 9th circuit, and it's a fucking disaster.
Yeah.
It just seems that way anyways.
It's an interesting
But
one.
at the same time, like, to be fair, there's stuff that's happening out there. Like, nope, I'm going to chill on this for a bit. I want to understand it all before I make a ruling. So I'll give them credit. We seem to be on the losing end of these things a little bit more frequently than I like to be.
Somebody did an analysis, and I wish I had the number off the top of my head, but I think it was since Heller had been decided before Bruen, the 9th Circuit had reviewed 40-something different gun control laws and had never struck one down.
Right.
So I won't pass judgment, but I'll just give you data.
Oh, I am. Yeah, I am.
So you'll have this preliminary relief that you go for. And basically the point there, like I said, is just maintain the status quo. Say, court, we're probably going to win, so don't let X state, don't let the feds enforce this law until we get to the end of the case. And then if we lose, we lose, and then the state can enforce it. Or if we win, which is what we're arguing, obviously, then you can strike down the law formally, but then no one will have been injured in the meantime.
Gotcha. Yeah, so nobody's going to be guilty of the new thing, whatever it happens to be.
Yeah, a great example of this is, so the 5th Circuit sitting en banc, which means the entirety of the circuit heard the case, which is different. Normally on an appeal, you get a panel of 3 judges.
Okay.
En banc means you get the entire court.
Wow.
And so the 5th Circuit sitting en banc just reviewed the ATF's 2018 rule banning bump stocks. Well, not banning but treating bump stocks as if they were machine guns and then thus banning them.
Right.
So the case was filed in 2018. It's now 2023. It's January. It's
right.
And that rule was just struck down by the 5th Circuit last week, 2 weeks ago. And how many people?
Yeah, I feel like it was just last week, but I guess it was 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yep.
But SHOT Show days are like kind of like dog years.
Vegas, it's a time warp here, man. Yeah.
It's been 2 days. It's actually been 8 months.
It's a black hole.
Yeah. There's no clocks around for a reason. But so how many people destroyed their bump stocks, got rid of them, turned them over, and now the 5th Circuit has just said that the ATS rule was unconstitutional. That's the kind of thing that preliminary relief is supposed to address. If a court would have entered a preliminary injunction in that case and prevented the ATF from enforcing it, then people could have, held onto their property and waited for a final decision.
Got it.
So that's that kind of initial push in a case, is that preliminary stage. Usually that one's really fast because either a law is about to go into effect or a law has just gone into effect. And so you want to get that relief for people so that they're not injured in the meantime.
Yeah, so I think that's, like when we hear about whatever it is, whatever stage it is, and trying to make some sense of where is this really going to happen? Like, oh, it'll never pass. In some cases it has passed and you're fighting it.
Yeah.
It's not that it hasn't passed, it's passed. But now you're appealing this.
Exactly.
And you're taking the time, and the court's granting you the time in order to come up with this argument, should they think that it's worth arguing.
Yeah.
As you articulated there. But there's this, this like, well, this will never happen. And we see things happen, right? And I think people have gotten a little bit lackadaisical in the sense of like, I think it's more like they don't have the bandwidth to handle anymore.
Yeah.
There's just so much happening. And they sit back and you hear this, well, this will never pass, or, just move. That's kind of, there's like a reductionist type of approach to this that I don't think is super healthy. And I wonder, like, from, the FPC side, while gun culture is huge and, the two-way community is massive and whatever, do you see like a waning support for this? Or is it better? Is it worse? Where are we? Like from your perspective?
Yeah, I think we're getting better. And I think people should be encouraged. And this isn't just like a rah-rah speech, but one thing I love to point to is carry laws in the United States. So you could pull up a map, you can see it online, you can go and dig into it.
Oh, it's all over, online now, yeah.
So if you look at carry laws in the United States in the 1980s, almost every state just prohibited it. You just couldn't carry a gun.
Right.
Or if you could, it was heavily restricted. And so flash forward to now, half of the states in the United States are free carry.
Right.
No permit requirement, as long as you're a law-abiding citizen, a peaceable person, and you can pass the background check to buy the gun, and you meet some other, general criteria, you can carry a firearm. So that's a huge shift. Yeah. And that's a few decades.
30 years, yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
40 years maybe.
Yeah. So yeah, just shy of 40 years probably. Like, I mean, that's a massive shift. So it's easy to feel like, that the state is just getting, worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. The state of affairs is just getting worse and worse and worse.
Mm-hmm.
But things are getting better. We're also winning cases. This is huge. So, we had a win. California passed a law that tried to make it so that if you challenged and you might.
I'm very familiar with this.
Okay.
Go ahead, yeah.
So if you challenged a state gun control law and you lost, then every person that was involved in the case essentially could be held financially liable for the cost of the state to litigate that case.
So ridiculous, man.
So
the fact that even was accepted as a potential.
Yeah.
The Attorney General in California, I got probably plenty of things to say about him, but that was not worded very well.
Yeah. Well, and they did it just in response to Texas's law, right?
Yep.
That was the only reason they did. And that was their non-defense defense of it was, well, if Texas's law is upheld, ours has to be, which is not how you pass laws. But so that was a huge case, right? We got a win in that case. We got, the injunction in the Northern District of Texas in this framer receiver case.
Mm-hmm.
We were just fighting an issue in Texas. Texas prohibited adults aged 18 to 20 from being able to carry a firearm in public.
Mm-hmm.
So you had to be a 21-year-old to be able to conceal carry, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's no historical basis for that. There's no historical basis for preventing 18-year-olds.
It's like an arbitrary number. There's a lot of arbitrary numbers that get pulled up. Whether that's how many rounds you're going to have in your magazine or how many, whatever length, of a particular firearm or something like that.
Well, and that one is particularly offensive to me because we wouldn't have a country if it wasn't for 18 to 20-year-olds around the founding era.
Facts.
I mean, the people were joining the militia. I mean, the Militia Act conscribed people down to age 17.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we don't have a Second Amendment without 18 to 20-year-olds carrying firearms to protect their communities.
I think that's a really important thing for people to understand. No matter what side you're on, is you don't have your First Amendment without the Second Amendment. And I know that's a popular thing to say now, but it's a lot of other things too. You don't have freedom of religion. You don't have the freedom to work and do the things you want to do. You don't have the freedom to make money the way you decide to make money. You don't express yourself. All that goes away.
Yeah.
I mean, look at the countries, and there's deep-rooted history in this as we look across the pond, so to speak, and in some of those Eastern European countries and down into Asia of what happens when you take away that right, when you can't protect yourself, all your other rights go away too. And it's less about, again, I think you got to see this on both sides. The fact that can't be seen, or that's being, it's not really like that, or it's not that bad, or you're being paranoid or whatever, that is particularly offensive to me. So, sorry, I didn't mean to jump in there, but that point doesn't seem to be getting across. Yeah. It's just, look at me, we're fighting, guns are bad, and we got to get rid of them.
Mm-hmm.
Are you sure that's what you want? Are you sure?
Yeah.
I mean, that's my question.
Yeah. A lot of scary things come with that, like you're talking about. And so I was just at an international conference not too long ago, and I got the opportunity to interact with a bunch of people. And I was probably the only gun rights affiliated person in a conference of hundreds. And what was really interesting to me, kind of like building on what you're talking about here, is everybody that was from a more Western right, like a European country, North America, they all would ask me, like, why do you guys care about guns? Like, why are you so stuck? Like, why aren't you willing to give up ground? Why aren't you willing to do this? How could you possibly need guns? Like, right, we're talking the English, Germans, Canadians, like all, that group. Anybody who came from a country that had experienced a dictatorship, a despot, a authoritarian form of government, went, I wish that we had that. I wish that we had this protection. I wish that we had groups like yours. Iran, Venezuela, China, somebody that had escaped from North Korea. I mean, these people were all just couldn't understand why more places didn't fight for people's ability to have these tools.
Yeah.
Right. And I talk about self-defense a lot. I talk about the right to self-defense because that's what's behind Second Amendment. But the right to self-defense, the natural right to self-defense is against the guy that breaks down your door and is coming in to threaten your family.
Yes.
But is also against a tyrannical form of government.
Yes.
And it's both. Those are both forms of self-defense. And when the framers, when they drafted and ratified the Second Amendment, that's what they meant.
Yeah, they got
right?
that. Yeah.
It wasn't having a shotgun so that you could go and hunt a deer wearing a Kevlar vest, right? It was self-defense against anybody that's trying to harm you, is trying to take from you, including your government, right? And that was hugely important to them. They were in the process of throwing off a government that was violating all of their rights that you're talking about, right?
Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Yeah. Not just speech, but speech, religion, assembly, ensuring that you have due process, assuring that, and what was so offensive in this California case, assuring that you have the right to petition your government for redress. I mean, that's a fundamental liberty. When you have a system of government, you have to be able to go to the government and say, hey, this is a problem.
Right.
And that overwhelming focus and that overwhelming divide that I saw in the international community was really interesting. And I think that's something that we have here, right? We have it in America. And I think we're starting to see some shifts. I think you're starting to see those battle lines drop or be drawn differently because it became really clear to people, especially during COVID, not just, danger if they were in a community that experienced, violence, but also the danger of government and how scary that can be and seeing what that looks like. I mean, you can call me crazy all you want, but I don't think Australia looks like Australia during COVID if they didn't also get rid of their ability to own arms. Maybe that's a bad example. Maybe that's not the case. But you can also look at disarmament as it's linked to more authoritarian and more bureaucratic regimes. Like I'm not like, pulling something out of a bag here, right? You could see the examples.
No, it's a solid example, and it was a really good test. I think the thing that shocked me the most was the haste at which a lot of this stuff was done or not done, for that matter, depending on what we were looking at, what policy, what particular issue. And then the walking back on so much of it after they've been hasty with it and whatever the decision was, and then not acknowledging that the haste and or the walking back has now contributed to a greater problem that you're still not addressing, and you're coming at it from a different angle, right? You're just coming at it from a different angle now, and that's you with nothing that shows any progress whatsoever. And you're saying, this is the answer. We need this law. This will change this, or we need this policy. This will make this better somehow, with no working model of that whatsoever. The only model they have is the one that didn't work, right? Or the model that was there, if we just used, we might end up just fine. Like if we just leave stuff alone. Again, going back to, I just want to be left alone. So you're sort of talking about this groundswell, and we're starting to see movement, and I think it's tough to keep that in perspective. I know it is for me. When you talk about having like 60 some odd open cases or whatever that are out there, and we're constantly just getting hit at just with this thing or the other thing. And I think it appears that when you get one state or one governing body, one agency that seems to be gaining some ground, like let's go like Oregon, Washington, right? Like what's happened there in the last few months, particularly in November with the magazine ban and the permit to buy ruling that came out.
The permit that's not a permit because they can't actually issue it?
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. I mean, I went deep with the guy there in Oregon, John Humpton from Black Flag Armory, and just talking about it. I thought he did a really good job of sort of opening up on that. Yeah. But it was like a week later, Washington was already promising, well, we're going to do the same thing. And then they started to push that stuff through. So from the outside looking in, it's just like, wow, like there is momentum on the other side. What do you have to say? What can you say about that? Yeah,
one of the most important things to address that side, that particular issue, is being on top of these things and being quick about it. So, we have a lawsuit in Washington, Sullivan v. Ferguson, which deals with Washington's magazine ban. We've got twin lawsuits in Oregon dealing with their new laws. We've got several lawsuits in California. some of these people will not be deterred, right? They're going to continue to try and violate people's rights because that's what they're going to do. And this kind of comes back to this idea, this kind of progressive model of government knows best. That's what you saw in COVID. I mean, right? You saw government knows best, like close the gyms, stop letting people work out.
Don't get your hair cut.
Yeah, don't get your hair cut. Yeah, that was always fun.
Can't go to a restaurant.
Yeah, but like you're good to go to fast food all day long. No problem. Go ahead and go drive through. I won't.
You really are trying to get me on a soapbox, aren't you?
I am. I'm just building you up here. No, but because you see that, right? And you see there are some people that will just not be deterred. And it's important to not be deterred on our side. It's important to, recognize the wins that we have. It's important to recognize that the culture is shifting, that I cannot tell you how many people. So I went to law school in California, San Diego, and I was one of very few people at my law school that believed in individual rights and freedom.
Oh, weird.
Shocking. And I cannot tell you how many people that I went to law school with reached out to me and said, hey, you do gun law, right? Like you understand, like, how do I buy a gun? And these are people who 2 years before would have been asking me like, well, why do you even support that? How are you working for a pro-gun group? Like, why would you ever do that? And now they're contacting me and saying, hey, there's a protest that's planned for down the street from me in a day. Like, how do I get a gun? And I would tell them, well, you can't. You have a 10-day waiting period in California.
By the way, you voted for this.
Yeah. Oh, I made sure to remind them of that. I had one friend who was a prosecutor, so she qualified as law enforcement, and it was before they needed the letter, which they now need from their authorizing. And I told her, I was like, you know what? Like, you can go and get a gun, and you can get one. You can flash your badge, because a lot of like prosecutors get actual badges. It's very weird. I was like, you can flash your badge, you can get a gun, and you should feel bad about it. I was like, you should hate yourself for doing it. You should do it, but you should hate yourself for doing it. Because the policies that you were fighting for and the things that you were voting to put into place are the reason why all of your friends can't go and protect their families.
Right. You can. You're law enforcement, right? You're considered that. Your government as law enforcement protecting them.
Yeah.
All day long or some form thereof with these firearms. And I agree. I couldn't agree with you more.
But it's really important to stay vigilant on the things that we have to keep fighting.
Gotcha.
Take our wins where we can, celebrate the wins, celebrate the injunctions, celebrate Bruen, take that moment to realize that we're doing something. Take the moment to look at the culture, how carry has played out in different places. Look at the innovation that the firearms industry has undergone, that like what people are able to own now, what we have, the ability that we're able to defend ourselves with now is getting just better and better and better. And those are all incredibly important. And those should give us that excitement and that energy to go into the fight the next day, to fight the government that won't be deterred, to fight the AG that doesn't care what the Supreme Court says or doesn't care what the Constitution says, because those people are going to exist. Those are the kinds of people that try to seize power in government. Those are the kinds of people that are going to wield government guns against people and are going to pass laws that are going to result in people being killed for not following them. And those people won't be deterred, so we can't be. Those fights are always going to exist, so we're going to fight them. Those people are always going to pass these laws, so we're always going to challenge them. And until we get to the point where those people can't anymore and those laws can't get
passed, not going to stop.
Then we'll be done. I like to say that like my goal at the end of the day is to put myself out of a job. I don't, it's not going to happen this year. It's not looking great for 2024 either.
You're settling in,
But my goal is to put myself out of a job. If we can get to the point where people can own what they want to own to defend themselves, to protect their families and to protect their communities, I will retire. I'll go work at a machine shop or maybe a gun store or probably a gym. Maybe I'll go work at a gym. I don't know.
I have the question, I guess, is like, what do you tell the Joe citizen out there who's just tired of all of it and, is bitter, and disgruntled and disenfranchised and just fuck that, I'm going to do whatever anyway, so it doesn't matter anymore? Because I think a lot of people are just reaching the end of their rope. And I think, when you see things like the pistol brace thing that just came out and where, just about, well, let's just say, I don't even know what the percentage of gun owners out there that would have, that, that have had these things.
Massive.
It's massive, right? It's too big to count.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's what they're trying to do with it, to figure that out. But you're instantly making, obviously, all these Americans law-abiding citizens, some not, let's be honest, like some of them aren't, but you're making them felons, overnight. And that just in and of itself, like I think probably for anybody that was teetering on the edge of not really having the energy for this anymore, this could be the final straw. And I guess the final straw being, I've been having to ask myself these questions and have this little conversation in my head or have it with somebody else about, like, what am I going to do if? And that's not a place I ever wanted to get to. Like, I just want to be left alone. I'm not hurting anybody. I'm not breaking any laws. I've never broken a law. I've got a speeding ticket or whatever in my life. And now all of a sudden, I'm being classed with this and saddled with this thing. And I can't do it anymore, man. So I just don't fucking care. And I'm just going to do what I need to do and go on with my day and just kind of bury my head in the sand. Because there's a lot of people out there doing that. I want to do that daily, a couple of times a day. Yeah. But here I am, and I'm having this conversation, and it's not that I need you to give me a pep talk, right?
I can.
The locker room talk. No, I don't need that, because I do find myself always coming back to, but it's not about you, dude. It's bigger than that, and that's what you're saying. Is like, this is way bigger, than one thing. It's not just about gun rights. Like, it goes down the line. What do you say to me when I'm like that?
Yeah, I mean, I fully understand, right? I mean, I live in this world. This is my day-to-day. I have those moments too, right? I'll be enjoying a evening, with my girlfriend. We'll be, out doing something, and then somebody will text me and say, "Hey, did you know that this just passed? Hey, this bill just came down," right? And you get this like adrenal fatigue. You're always on 11, and you're just trying to keep up. And so sometimes the right answer is just step away, take a break, think about it, recontextualize, and think about what's important for you. So, I'm an attorney, so I'm not I would never tell people to break the law. I think that there's an important concept here. One thing that you'll see if you read any of FPC's work is we talk about peaceable people. When we talk about peaceable people, because that's a little bit different than law-abiding. I don't think law-abiding conveys the right message.
Oh, this is interesting.
Because
I like where this is going.
I don't derive and I don't think we should, I don't derive my morality from law, right? Law is not the benchmark. There are unjust laws. There are laws that are offensive. There are laws that harm people that should not be harmed. Peaceable people, don't harm anybody else unless they've been harmed first, right? It's this basic idea of, live your life, do what you want to do.
The golden rule, treat other people like you want to be treated.
Yeah, don't hurt other people. They're not going to hurt you.
That's good common sense.
Yeah. Right. So I really think it's important to talk about peaceable people and to ensure that we're fighting for peaceable people. Because there are unjust laws. There are laws that are unconstitutional that are on the books, and there are laws that courts will determine later to be unconstitutional that have been wielded against people. The bump stock one is a great example, just because it's so fresh in people's mind, right? So I think that's really important. But it's tough to just to focus on the negatives, right? You always focus on the ATF just passed this rule. The ATF just passed this rule. The ATF just passed this rule. I think the best thing that you can do is you can look to those things that have been better, or, look to the people who are able to take on the fight. Look to the people who, you enjoy what they're doing and see their work. Whether, obviously I'm very partial to
Sure.
FPC's work and to what we're doing, but find the people that you can support and you can resonate with and you can get in the fight. You don't have to be a lawyer in the courtroom, right? Like, you don't have to be some of the people that are taking on the fight that are able to kind of like, push back, or, we represent individuals in cases. We represent Vanderstock v. Garland is the name of the case in the Northern District of Texas for the framer-receiver rule. Okay. Jennifer Vanderstock was a former law enforcement officer who then became a teacher. And when she was a teacher in Texas, she carried a firearm to protect her classroom. And then now she's not teaching anymore and she still carries a firearm. She got into self-manufacturing firearms because she wanted to learn about the tool that she was using to protect herself and her friends and her community and her loved ones. She stepped up and took on the fight. When we have, hundreds of examples. Every single one of those 60 cases, there's a person involved.
Yeah, there's somebody behind it.
There's somebody that stepped up. So those people, I look to them for inspiration all the time. If I get bogged down in a case, if I've got back-to-back filings, if I've got a bunch of briefs due, and it's a really tough time, I think about those people. So in Washington, we're representing Gabriella Sullivan. She's a 24-year-old nurse who lives at home who has a firearm so that she can protect herself when she goes to and from her job and goes in and out of the hospital in late night shifts. This
is not weird.
No.
It's not a weird thing when you really think about it. So.
Yeah. And so I look to those people when I need that extra moment. I look to, the 24-year-old who stepped up and said, this is wrong. This hurts me. This stops me from protecting my life, but it also hurts my community and hurts other people like me that might not be able to step up. Our clients in the Vanderstock case, tactical machining, they produce those items that the ATF doesn't really like right now that are the subject to that framer receiver case. They stepped up. I mean, they put their name on a federal lawsuit against the ATF.
That's putting it on the table, man.
Yeah, and they're a regulated entity, right? They have to work with the ATF every day. They have an FFL, so they have to work with the ATF, and they're suing Department of Justice and the ATF. I mean, that takes some.
It takes a serious constitution to be able to do that, like internally, going back to the term constitution. But you have to be able to go to work every day and not be pissed, not be bitter, not lose your people. Like, I'm in this fight, and I don't like this guy, who's here. I don't like this person, this agent or this entity or whatever else. But it's not going to stop me. I'm just going to do what I do because we know it's the right thing to do. It takes a special kind of person.
Yeah,
better than me. I got to tell you, I walked past the ATF booth yesterday when I was here, and I made it a point not to ever go past that thing again because I had a physical reaction to it. I'm just looking over there going, what the hell are you guys even doing here?
Yeah.
And how dare you, kind of thing. It's so easy going back to the negative and the bitter and, all that stuff. These are just humans. They're humans, and I get that. But yeah, you lose that bandwidth and you start to stack those, that negativity. And going back, like, I think what you said there's super important about, in terms of identifying, what is it that I'm pissed about or who is it that I am in this process? I can be a non-lawfully, I can not obey a law and still be a peaceable citizen. I can be both, right? And again, you're not advising.
No.
But if I decide not to throw that pistol brace in the trash, that doesn't make me a criminal, right? It doesn't make me, now it might look like that in the eyes of the law, but I am not that person. I'm a peaceable citizen or peaceable people, right? Who's deciding to exercise my rights in this particular way, despite maybe what somebody else said. And I'm not hurting anybody. It's not so I can go out and hurt somebody or inflict harm or interfere with anybody else's life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. This is for me, and that's it. And so I can walk away from that. Now, this might sound cheesy to folks, but I can walk away from that feeling pretty good. So for the people that are struggling or on that edge of, where does this put me? And how am I going to look in the eyes of my family? And how do I, like I'm telling my 16-year-old, don't do this because it's against the law, right? But this is a just law. We have this law for certain reasons. And then in the same conversation or in the next conversation, have this other one like, yeah, but Dad, you don't do this, or you're doing it this way. That's a real different shift and a real different mindset for people to get their head around. Yeah,
and I think that important part of it is, morality doesn't come from law.
Yes.
Right? We all have our different place. Everybody's got their place where they draw their morality from or where they tie it to. But, for progressives, that might be law, but it isn't for me. And I think for a lot of, people that are going to be listening to your show, for a lot of the people that, we work with, a lot of our supporters, our followers, that's not where your morality comes from. Just because the state says something is so does not make it so, which we've definitely learned in a lot of contexts.
In spades, yeah.
But, one of the other reasons why I love what you do, right? So what I love what you guys are doing with this is because the other thing that can help you when you have the defeated is to tackle the things in your life that you can make sure that you're, healthy, you're on top of your stuff. I love the way that you guys have your structure. I love that, you're digging into like health and fitness and like taking care of yourself so that you can have energy for the fight, right? Like, I think that's hugely important. I think if you let yourself get caught up and you just kind of allow it to spiral, that's easy to do, right? And then, your diet's like crap. You stop working out, you start drive-throughs, few too many beers to wind down after it. You wind yourself up with caffeine, you wind yourself down with alcohol, whatever it is, right? If you let that happen, then you're taking yourself out of the fight, right? You're taking yourself out of the movement. You're taking yourself out of the ability to kind of be involved. And I think that's so hugely important is people let themselves get kind of spun up and spiral and they don't know what to do with it. And unless you can kind of like really address those things, then you can kind of put yourself back in. You can, and people can contribute however they can contribute.
Yeah, let's talk about that. So what I hear you saying is, thanks for the compliment, by the way, is getting your house in order.
Yeah.
And before,
I'll pick up my check on the door.
Yeah, we're not sponsored. But having your house in order, and you can't pour from an empty cup or a half full or whatever. A glass is half empty versus full. But yeah, it seems and then it's really easy to be angry, at somebody. But if you're not, it's like people in glass houses shouldn't throw stones, sort of thing. So to add to the fire, right? If you're not doing what you need to do to keep your own fire, down, it's a little bit offensive, quite frankly, to me. Now, it doesn't mean you can't help, and everybody's got something to work on, me included. Nothing about what I do, nothing about my diet is perfect. Nothing about my workouts is perfect. Nothing about my, my sleep and how I take care of myself. There's no perfection, but I am constantly working on it. It's a real practice. So, I guess I get where you're coming from on that, but I think kind of where the transition is how can people like help? How do they get in a fight and feel like, particularly let's just look in the shooters community, everything is measured, right?
Yeah.
Like, and a lot of things get measured, right? And this was ridiculousness in a lot of ways, but they want to know what the score is, right? They want to know, am I getting a win here? Or did I really contribute? Or does this really matter? And again, going back to, I think, people losing steam and losing energy, they're like, doesn't seem to matter what I say or do. It never fucking changes.
Yeah.
So how can they do that and be assured that what they're helping some way and feel it, but also see it?
Yeah. I mean, the easy answer, right, is to support the organization that's taking the fight that you appreciate, right? So FPC doesn't exist without our supporters, without the people that help us, that help fund the fight. Lawsuits take a long time. Lawsuits are really expensive. The way that I can help the fight is, I'm a lawyer. I can go in the courtroom. I can draft the briefs. I can do this. I've also chosen to work for an organization with that means that I get to do those sorts of things. The easy answer is for people like, you can join the fight like that. I mean, your dollars go directly towards lawsuits. You can look and see exactly what's happening. You can see, the briefs that are filed. You can see the hours that takes just by reading them. And so, that's the direct way. That's the obvious way. But there's other ways too. Like, everybody can't just, stop tomorrow and, donate and fund. We have some pretty reasonable limits to join FPC, we think. So we'd love for people to do that. Okay. Join us on the website. There's a little fancy, join and click, and you can put in your information. But the other thing you can do is, share information about the cases. So you'll see things are coming out that talk about wins that are looking for people to, stand up as plaintiffs in cases, talking about what the government's doing, talking about the brace rule. You can share that information out too. You can talk to your friends. You can talk to people. You can have that conversation with people who are a little bit confused about like, why does a pistol brace rule matter? I mean, sit down with your friend who doesn't understand pistol braces and explain what it's about and explain how it functions. There are so many opportunities. You can keep blasting out the message. You can keep, blasting out the wins is always great too.
Yep.
Show people those wins. Show what's going on. Having those conversations, educating your community, educating your family, talking about these issues. One of the things that, I think becomes evident every year at SHOT is, sometimes the firearms community gets a little insular, right? And sometimes we're not good.
Sometimes? A lot
I'm
of times.
being nice.
It's an echo chamber, man.
I have to see these people for the next couple of days. Sometimes it gets insular, and sometimes our response is, just like, fuck them.
Right.
Like, I don't want to deal with them.
Yep.
And that can't always be the answer. Sometimes,
it's appropriate. Yeah. Sometimes it's appropriate.
Sometimes there's people that don't have any, that are, grandstanding or don't have any interest in being involved. But, there are opportunities out there for people to go out shooting, to people learn about the fights. One of the things that's been really cool to see, and one thing that's been really important, is the industry is really getting into the fight. And we're starting to see people, I've been blessed here at SHOT Show to be able to talk to some of the different industry members. And, a lot of them are saying, we're in, like, we want to help you. We're starting to see what's going on. We're starting to see this push. We're seeing it in our backyard. It's happening in our state.
If it's not there, it's coming.
Exactly. And they're really getting into. And, a lot of times when you're a big corporation, you don't want to rock the boat, right? It's bad for business to be too outspoken, has been, is a mantra at times. It's really cool to see the industry really step into the fight, and people wanting to know, like, how can they get involved? How can they support? How can they help? Manufacturers getting involved in lawsuits, supporting everything. So I think that's been a really cool shift too.
I have to be honest, like, for me, I want to know what that builder, whoever, that brand that I buy from, what are they doing to get the message out there to people, which should be smart for them in terms of supporting their business and the longevity of it. But I want to know what the guy that I look up to, or that brand that I look up to, is doing to support. And I think it's fair to ask now. Like, so what are you doing to help fight? Or are you just here for the money grab? And that's a really unfair way of looking at it. And it's a very reductionary. But at the same time, it's like, hey, listen, if you're going to be in this business, and it is what you're saying, or what it says in your mission statement on your website or whatever, is, hey, we're patriots, and we're here to defend our rights. Are you though? Are you really working? I think it's fair to ask them, what are they doing to support organizations like you? A long time ago, it used to be about the NRA, right? And that was like almost like a stamp of, it's like the Better Business Bureau kind of thing. Well, you got that, so you're, it's official. You're okay, right?
Exactly.
And there are other organizations, so it doesn't necessarily have to be FPC. But I think for, to the consumers out there, I think it's fair to ask, you're the people that are building your stuff, that you're buying your stuff, and where you're spending your dollars, what are they doing to contribute outside of just selling stuff to the community?
Yeah, and I think that's awesome. We've got a lot of corporate partners that, when you order from them, you have the opportunity to also do a donation. There's some that do roundups. There's some that, support the fight directly. If anybody's on the FPC email list, you'll see that we do like gun giveaways all the time for joining FPC. A lot of those are coming from people donating them to us. Manufacturers donating them to us, and that's huge. And that really shows that commitment to the fight. And I agree. I'm not saying that people that aren't doing that are not committed. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is
I'm not either, by the way.
What I'm saying is it's really cool to see the ones that are willing to step in and willing to join the fight, and in any way, whether that's with us, amazing. I love it. Whether that's with somebody else, awesome. That's we're all fighting the fight. The goal is to win. The goal is maximal human liberty. The goal is for people to be free. And I just want to get there. I would love to put myself into retirement.
I heard you. Yeah, I heard you when you said that previously. I'm just sitting here listening to you, and we're sort of reverse engineering or doing this podcast right now. There's people out here that may be listening, right, and going, wow, this is fucking interesting stuff. I mean, I'm a shooter, like, and I'm studying law, or I have thought about it or whatever. I wonder how this started for you. Like, did you ever see yourself being I see you as like a crusader, at this stage when you decided to go to law school and get into whatever. I mean, how did this come about for you, man?
Yeah, it's kind of a long story. So I'll do my best to just kind of summarize it. But I didn't come from a shooting background. I didn't come from a gun-owning family. I didn't come from a hunting background. I grew up in Southern California. I didn't shoot a firearm for the first time until I was 21.
Okay.
So I was wholly unexposed. And I kind of had a confluence of events. So when I was in undergrad, I was a classics and philosophy major.
Okay.
Which is one of those degrees that on the back side of it says useless.
I don't want to say that.
It's fine. It actually became helpful later because it really grounded me in my philosophical understanding. And I think that's so important for our fight, is that natural rights understanding, natural law. And then the classics really grounded me in history. Is what does it look like when you lose this, right? So I was, my big focus was the Roman Republic. I'm a huge Roman Republic guy. And so watching what the Republic was able to do and how they were able to, empower individuals. Obviously, it was a very different time.
Yeah.
And the change that happened instantly when you get like tyrants and bureaucrats and you get Caesar. I mean,
when the people were fed up.
Yeah.
They were fed up. But on the flip side, like you give dudes like that power, things get ugly real fast.
Yeah. So it really did ground me. But I had to make a decision on what I wanted to do. And something that I had always considered was law. And what did that look like? And I wanted to do something different, something to be able to contribute to people. I didn't know what that meant.
Okay.
So I went to law school. At the same time that I was going to law school, my dad was dealing with the process of buying firearms in California.
Okay.
10-day waiting period.
As a citizen, as a user, end user. Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah, my family's all mechanics. I was the first person in my family to go to college, let alone law school. He was just a guy trying to buy a gun. That was it.
Got it.
And so 10-day waiting period, one firearm every 30 days. If you miss the 30-day window, you have to start all over. Rostered handguns, limits on magazine, all the things that you're really familiar with. I was watching him go through that process while I was sitting in law school, learning about our system of government from the legal perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And I was sitting especially in con law. And in con law, I hate con law, by the way, because I keep a textbook in my office. It's from 1969. It's a 2-volume set. It's a con law textbook. The text of the Constitution does not appear in the textbook.
So what's in it?
It is all what these justices said about what these justices said about what these justices said about what the Constitution said. The Constitution, for reading for con law, the Constitution is your summer reading that you do before class so that on day one you can dig into the things that really matter. And
I always did all that reading, by the way.
And so lawyers don't learn about the Constitution. Lawyers learn about constitutional law, which is a very different thing. And so I was seeing what was happening and what my dad was going through, just trying to be a law-abiding gun owner. In that sense, very truly just trying to follow the law. And then was seeing how my con law professor was explaining how government worked and how, no, this is what, this Supreme Court decision says that the government has that power. And, my line, she was also very good, I should say. She recognized that I had a different perspective, and there was 3 of us in the class that would sit together that didn't really agree with their viewpoint. And she would push to us every now and then and would say, "Hey, Cody, what do you think about that?" And I would go, "Well, it's funny. I was reading the Constitution last night. Didn't see any of this in there."
That's a great response.
So I kind of experienced that. And what I felt was that guns, firearms, and self-defense was the microcosm of the macrocosm. It was the perfect example of what you have when you have a disfavored right and what government can do using that general societal treatment of it, right? And if they can make it to where people don't care, then they can infringe it for anybody. And I watched that happen, and I just got so focused on what that meant for people. And if we can't win that fight for gun rights, then we're going to lose that fight for speech.
Yeah,
we're going to lose
covered that at the beginning.
Yeah,
man.
you're going to lose all of it.
Yeah.
And so I really saw it as the leading edge. I saw it as, if this goes away, everything else goes away. And I want to do something so that it doesn't. And so when I started my career actually working for government, thinking I could probably change it from the inside. Fun fact, couldn't.
Yeah, right. Good luck with that.
It's a pretty behemoth.
I appreciate the ambition, though.
I tried. I did what I could. Hey,
you don't know until you know.
And then I shifted and moved to the nonprofit space, thinking, well, I'm just going to sue the government instead. And when I started there, I started with a foundation that did a lot of property rights stuff, a lot of environmental from the ranching and farming perspective.
Okay.
And they had a couple gun cases. And I remember interviewing with them and I said, "Hey, look, I'd love to come in and do your Endangered Species Act work, but
give me this other thing.
Yeah,
too.
let me take your gun cases. You don't have anybody doing them right now. Let me do them. Let me build that into something. And I fell in love. I've like really, fell in love with the industry also. And I've spent a lot of time, learning more and more about the industry, becoming as much of a gun guy as I can be, and really geeking out on that side. And I love that side of it too. It really kind of balances what I get to do in the court. I don't get to pull triggers as much as I would love, but I'm sure that's true of everybody.
Yeah, it's definitely me. Yeah.
But I really came to it from seeing that dichotomy and from that kind of philosophical constitutional sense, and then just fell in love with everything else that entailed.
Bringing that in, like, so now with FPC, I wonder about the culture, right? And are the people that are there that you work with and side by side every day, and what does it feel like there? Is it a bunch of people like Cody, or is it, walk into, I don't know, in my head, I imagine like walk into the law office, right? And, there's the receptionist at the front desk, and then you walk through the thing, and there's corner offices and, whatever, cubicles in the middle. And, I guess I don't know. I have no idea what it looks and feels like. I would love to kind of understand like the culture there. Who are the people, and what does the day-to-day look like for them? Like when we say we're fighting the fight, like what does that really mean? Yeah,
it's I'm dressed up from an FPC perspective. I put on a collar for you. You're welcome,
dude. Appreciate that. I'm sitting here in my treadmill t-shirt.
It is a bunch of people who love the fight and love the movement and want to fight for people's rights. And we do that in a lot of different ways. So, we've got the guys on the legal side where we're just like on top of trying to file lawsuits and to maintain, everything we've been talking about, watching how those go through. But then, we have guys that are working in making sure that our digitals are up to par. We have guys that are, putting out the memes that everybody loves.
I love them. Looking great. Yeah. It's part of the reason I asked, is trying to get like a read on all that.
Yeah. It's a bunch of really cool people that are just dedicated to the fight. It's not like a law office. It's not like a stuffy, it's not a lot of suits. It's a lot of just
That's good to know.
Genuine people.
That's good to know.
Yeah. And it's cool. You can see too, like you can see some of the guys that I work with that will do like media updates and stuff. You can watch a video with Bill anytime and you'll get a good idea of our culture just by how Bill is. He's great. And so you can really see that. And I think, I like to think that I like fit in with that, and I embody that of just, it's about the fight. Everybody contributes how they can. And it's not about, we don't need to be the stuffy suit in order to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Like I can be myself and come to the fight how I need to, and be able to be me as a representative of FPC. And I think that's huge. And I think that, all of our guys are really comfortable with both sides of it, right? Our guys can talk about the cases. They can talk about the legal work. Mm-hmm. Some of our team that's non-attorneys that just like track some of the stuff that we're doing. So people that are, online will be familiar with Rob 2A updates on Twitter. He does a lot of case updates and works with us. He's amazing at like staying on top of everything that's going on and knowing where all these things are. And he's not an attorney, and he can look at a bill half the time and know exactly what it says and have no problem understanding it. And he's just brilliant at being able to get information out to people. Right. And, I love to do things like this. I like to go and talk to people. I like to tell people the story. My goal is always to, translate what we do. I think it's really important. Like I said, I came from a blue collar background. Mm-hmm. I always think about like, if I'm talking to my dad, like, how am I going to explain this to my dad where I'm not necessarily using legal terms, but it can make sense.
Yeah.
And we can have that conversation. And I love being able to do that. And I think it's really important. I think it's hard sometimes to sit and go, last night we filed a lawsuit against Illinois and we'll be moving, and you can understand what that is. But then if I break down and I say like, oh, well, we'll be going for, we're going for a TRO in this case. Yeah. And then, the Supreme Court in 1860.
Right.
Like it doesn't help. And if you can't understand what's going on, then it's lost.
I think that's such an important part of that too, just in terms of the both sides of it and people understanding like what's really going on and how they consume this information. You know, you mentioned the memes and whatever. Like, yes, everybody loves the memes. They're great. But that's what we end up reposting because, you can kind of get lost in this is what happened today in Illinois. And, you know, it's you guys do a really good job summarizing stuff, but that doesn't play as well like in the Instagram story or, you know, or whatever else it is. But it does provide, no matter who you are, like on what side you're coming from, you can get this information. It's accessible to people. Yeah. You talked about studying history, right? Studying philosophy. Yeah. And people just don't do that anymore, man. So they might not even be able to relate to any, like if you ask them about the Roman Empire and the things that were going, they wouldn't know what the hell you're talking about. Yeah. It's just not, people are not coming at it. When I say people, it's a really broad and blanket statement. They're not coming at it from that mind frame. So I think it's so important that you're doing what you're doing. And that's why I was so pumped up about having you here because you're like, you're fired up guy. Like you just like, you're the type of guy I want in the fight. Like if I'm going to be in the fight, like I want that kind of energy. So kind of one of the last questions here is like, is there a case right now that you're on that you're fired up about, or there's something happening, you know, that you're working on like as a project, you know, outside of, you know, what we're doing here and how you're doing it here. But is there anything that you just fucking motivates you every day to get up and just kill?
Oh, wow. I think what's really got me recently, and, you know, I talk about how you get these peaks and valleys and you kind of go too hard for a minute, but, these ATF rulemakings are offensive and they're insidious. And it violates our basic tenets of government. It violates the basic separation of powers. It's the executive branch, which is charged with enforcing the law, rewriting law, and then enforcing it how they rewrote it. It's giving the gavel of the courtroom to the executioner. I mean, and I think why they offend me so much is because something like Illinois. So last night, I don't know when this will go up, but during SHOT Show, we filed a lawsuit against the state of Illinois for their so-called assault weapons ban and for their magazine ban. And those kinds of fights make sense to people. And we start talking about the Second Amendment there, right? We start talking about how the Second Amendment prohibits Illinois from doing what it's doing, because it absolutely does. That just makes sense. That's easy to talk about. When you start talking about what the ATF is doing through these rulemakings, you have to start talking about the rulemaking process. And you have to start talking about the Administrative Procedure Act. The Administrative Procedure Act is the rules that Congress put on agencies that restrains them when they are passing rules and they're interpreting their own policies and they're making their own internal guidance. And you have to start talking about the Federal Register, which is where all these things are housed. Like, it's so much more buried in government bureaucracy, and they take advantage of that.
And that's the insidiousness, because once one of these things comes through, it starts to it's cancer.
And what's so insidious about it too, exactly. And then people look at it and go, well, the Second Amendment. And when we file these lawsuits, we're filing APA lawsuits. I'm filing and saying, you violated the Administrative Procedure Act, which is the rules that government set for you because you exceeded your statutory authority. Like, that kind of makes sense, but that's also like a nonsense lawyer sentence, right? What we're saying is Congress said that you couldn't do this.
And you did it.
And you did it. So, do not pass, go directly to jail, do not pass go, do not collect $200.
Yeah, but why are we...
That kind of works well in this context.
Yeah, exactly. But why... it's pretty ironic, actually. But why are we even having to do that? That's the question. It's like, we shouldn't even be having this conversation right now. Like, I shouldn't even be filing this lawsuit because you should not have done that with no consequence, right?
Yeah. And so that's what's been firing me up recently. So that Vanderstock case in Texas, and we went in and we won the injunction. We proved that we were likely to succeed. And the court said that this is likely outside the ATF statutory authority. They don't have the authority to regulate things that aren't frames or aren't receivers. They can't just make up the law because it accomplishes their policy goals. And that's huge. I think that that's a big shift because it's not just a Second Amendment win in that context, right? We're holding the agency to their own rules that Congress set for them, and we're stopping the agency from becoming a legislative body. Mm-hmm. So I think those cases, because they kind of get buried, because they're not the sexy Second Amendment cases, sometimes it's hard to explain them and sometimes it's hard to talk about them, which makes them just even more dangerous, right? It's not, you can't just walk in and say, Second Amendment, I'll see you next week in court. You have to go in and say, well, the rule that you published exceeds your authority, or it wasn't sufficiently grounded in the prior rule, or you introduced new sources that weren't in the. So you're nodding off as I talk.
I'm hearing it and I'm just rolling my eyes going, again, why are we even having this fucking conversation? Yeah. Not with you and me, but like to think it's happening at a federal level.
Yeah.
Again, going back to the industry of this, it's just like the government has to have more people in order to, manage the bigger government that they've created. It's this huge industry. It's this ongoing thing. And that just wrecks me. And so again, I roll my eyes. It's like, the answer really is we need you to not do any of this. Let's have less of you doing this stuff and we wouldn't have to worry about this. And not that everything's going to be fine. I don't see it that way. Like we have a government for a reason, but it's way overstepping its bounds. Yeah. And ATF isn't even the government. It's, it's an agency. It's an arm of one of the governments. I don't know, man. So I hear you and it's getting me fired up. And that's, and again, like, if I'm going to go, and I'm the type of guy that bangs my head against the locker, before I go out on the field or, the court or the mat or whatever. Like, not everybody's like that. Some people come in with the very even keel, like focus, or they don't get too high or too low. I just heard you start to talk about that, and I could visibly see things change in you. You are in how fired you up are about that stuff. And that gets me fired up, like I said, and I hope it fires other people up to want to be a part of this somehow, or maybe reframe and reapproach how they thought about doing that before so that they can make this productive and understand the ins and the outs. The best way they can that isn't lawyer speak, right? And or government bureaucracy jargon. And I imagine that's a tough thing to do, but you're doing such a good job. I've just been so impressed with you, man, and what you can bring to the table. If we're trying to get people to get more of you or just get more of what you're doing and talk to your people, where do they go? How do they do it? We talked about the Instagram and how important that is, in terms of getting information. We talked about the website. Are those the best ways? Are there other ways?
Yeah, those are definitely the best ways. So you can go to firearmspolicy.org. You can see all of our work on there. You can click on legal action and see everything that's going on. It's like I said, it's organized by circuit and state. So you can scroll and see exactly what's happening in your backyard, but see what we're doing around the country. We're at gun policy on just about every social media. So those are really good ways to follow along. And those will also let you know where you can get involved too, right? If something's coming down the pike in your state, then you have the opportunity to get involved and, fight it however you can there, whether that means, contacting representatives, whether that means, getting a grassroots together, whatever works for your state, whatever works for, a lot of people that listen, if you have a gun store, right, you can start the fight that way. You can put out information about what's going on. So social medias are a really great way to stay plugged in, to know exactly what's going on. Obviously we would love for people to join, to support, to help fund the fight, to help make sure that we can file lawsuits in the middle of SHOT Show, to help make sure that we can do these things, to help hold ATF accountable when we can. I have also avoided the booth for the best. And so, those are really great ways for people to know what's going on. But then beyond that, find the person who you can understand what they're saying and you respect in the community and follow them and know what's going on, right? We've got...
There's a lot of people out there that are doing a great job with this. Yeah.
And what's beautiful about the world that we live in now, right, is the access to information is so amazing, right? So if you love, whoever you love on social media, whoever you like following, whoever's talking about the issues, and I think that's one thing I would say, right? It's great to just follow and stay up on what the industry's doing and, the cool new gun, the cool new toy, to see these new drills, to train, do that side. But I think it's really important to make sure that you're also staying educated on the legal side.
Yeah, there's a you should feel a duty or responsibility to that in my mind, which is why we're here.
Yeah.
And I think you guys should have a podcast, and I think you guys should be hosting it like once a week. Drop like, hey, here's what happened this week, and let me just explain it for people to get on and get in a little bit like longer format.
Yeah,
because
that's a great idea.
Because the way you just did that and laid all that stuff out, and we could talk about cases all night. I really didn't want to make this about that, and thank you for not doing it. But bringing up the examples is important, and you being able to kind of succinctly put that together. Because I just want to go out and shoot, right? But I still want to stay informed, and there's going to be a give and a take with that. And like I said, we, the people, as a whole, whether you're gun or anti-gun, we have a duty to understand this. Yeah. We have a responsibility as a people to understand this. And if you are in the community and you do care about it, and you do call yourself a two-way advocate and supporter and all, patriot and all these kind of things, you should feel a very deep sense of duty and responsibility to understand it, so that you can not just like it, but like and share, but to be able to have that communication in
exactly, because
it's really wild out there how that communication is happening, what people actually get, what they're actually reading, what's actually being said. Again, going back to like, if the government is getting away with, again, if the ATF can write up all this garbage and put it out there, and that's the federal government doing that, right? And it's not okay. It is against the law, but people are reading it thinking that it is. There has to be 10 times, 10x, 100x that coming out the other side explaining that this isn't okay and it isn't right, and the reasons why, not just being, fuck them. Like we talked about. So,
and that shift in culture is huge, and that shift in conversation to get away from just talking about, your split times, and then being able to talk about your split times, and then to talk about, like, this is what Washington just did. This is what Oregon just did. And, I think what the ATF did in putting out this race rule right before SHOT Show, I think it's started to show more of that. And, what's really cool at the show this year is that you're seeing people look and play with the new toys, you're seeing with them, and then they're talking about federal regulation. And that's awesome to me. The idea that we can sit and have these conversations about industry innovation on the product side, or on the training side, or on the gear side, and then once we're done having that conversation, then we can sit down and go like, oh, and New York's putting in place a body armor ban, right? Let's talk about that. Like, let's look at the cool new plate carrier. Like, I know I was geeking out over some. I think I might need to buy a new one. And do that, and then talk about, well, let's look at this. Let's look at what the government's doing, and having that side of the conversation. And I think our industry is really getting there.
Yeah, I think it is too.
And I think that people are really having those conversations. And I think they have been for some time. I'm not saying that like this has magically changed, but there's a different air right now. And I think that brace rule coming down, them announcing it on Friday, really fired people up. And walk the floor of SHOT Show. If you're not here, look at all the stuff coming out. Braced pistols are half the things that are out there.
Oh my God, they're everywhere, man.
Right? And so you can't avoid that conversation anymore. And I think that's really important, in that we take that on and we come at it from an educated perspective, and we come at it from the culture perspective. And ultimately, that's what FPC is all about. We're about education. We're about culture. We want people to understand what maximal human liberty means, what individual rights means, and then from that perspective, take the fight, right? We have the moral high ground in this case. The gun control movement likes to try and seize the moral high ground, right? They try and say guns are responsible for this, or firearms are responsible for this, or the industry is responsible for this. That's bullshit.
Yep.
It disgusts me when you see a politician stand up after there's been a public shooting and say, we need more gun control, because it's their fault that those are gun-free zones in the first place. It's their fault that these people are disarmed. And we have the moral high ground. We're fighting for people being able to protect themselves. We are fighting for communities to be better defended. We're fighting for people to be safer and to have that ability, and to have the ability to take on their own self-protection. That is the ultimate moral authority. We win, and we should be winning. And that is massive. And when we're having these conversations, when we're starting to talk about the law, when we're starting to talk about the policy, and we're looking at it from that lens, I think that's amazing to see.
Yeah, I do too. And I think you hit the nail on the head. It's like it's not just started, but it's being normalized.
Yeah.
And it's an appropriate conversation to be having. And again, products are cool, gear is cool, training is cool, split times are cool. But there is this whole
My split times aren't very cool.
Yeah, mine aren't either. I'm not that great. But I'm trying to get better.
Exactly.
And I'm trying to get better at understanding this, because otherwise you're very one-sided, right? And that to me, it ends up being a little bit boring. So I think, again, as a culture and what you guys are doing from the inside out, and that you mentioned it, because I got the same feeling down there, over the last couple of days, just talking about more than just the gun, or whatever it is that you're holding in your hand at that particular point. And people are open and willing to it. It's not weird, right? It isn't offensive. It's not, oh, here we go again. It's right now, it's in your face.
Yeah.
So we could get like some critical mass behind, if we could get some critical mass behind this, or a little bit more from those that may have been a little bit more afraid, or I haven't really been around a lot of people to understand this, and get the information in a way that they can digest and assimilate.
Yeah.
That helps push the thing. And I hear that's what you're saying. I think in the end is like, look, just be more aware. Just take the information that we're giving you, have these conversations, and understand that, you might not get all the deep-rooted lawyer jargon and all the things, but this is bigger than a pistol brace.
Yeah.
This is bigger than a pistol brace. And, it's okay to be pissed off sometimes, but staying that way is likely not going to be helpful or productive.
Yeah, absolutely.
Dude, I like I said, totally impressed, and extraordinarily grateful for having this conversation with you. Thanks for sitting down and doing that and going through all that stuff. Like I said, we could have talked about cases. I really didn't want to make it about that today. You kind of given everybody, a great way to maybe step back from this and think about it. I really hope people do. And I cannot wait to see you specifically and what you do and what you're doing with FPC, but also to continue to follow and support FPC and the things, and just say thanks for the fight.
Yeah, absolutely. We appreciate it. Like I said, I love what you guys are doing. I think the balance that you guys are striking is amazing. It's really cool to see the kind of well-rounded approach. Thanks for having me. We appreciate it. Like I said, people can follow us at Gun Policy on everything. I'm at the Wizard of Laws with a Z on just about everything. So you'll see me like randomly. You can tell when I'm not balanced because I'll have like a random angry rant session on Twitter, and then I'll re-level. I'll take a breath. Sometimes I get fired up. It happens. But just thanks for having me. We appreciate it. Thanks for helping blast out the message and helping us in the fight. I mean, this is exactly what our goal is, right? Educate people, let them know what's going on, let them know where they can get more information, let them know how they could get involved. So thank you.
Yeah, for the record, I like the fired up Cody.
He comes out every now and then, usually around when there's a federal government official on the other side of the V of one of my cases. So.
Keep doing that, man. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.